Today we're going to be talking about how you configure the metrics within SQL Diagnostic Manager, some of the options that are available for you, how you can turn on and turn off metrics and adjust them to your liking. So the process of monitoring within SQL Diagnostic Manager works in this way. As you add SQL instances, either via the Manage Servers wizard or when you're trialing the product and you've just finished the installation, there's a Getting Started wizard. But in either case, when you add a SQL instance, what happens is we apply a template. There are 6 pre-configured templates with SQL Diagnostic Manager. You can also add your own custom templates, of course. Almost everyone uses the default template, which is sort of the go-to. We do have critical-only templates, which is a template of metrics mostly aimed at QA servers and dev servers. A performance template, which is mostly aimed at high-end SQL instances. And then we have some specific templates that are available for RDS and Azure offerings. Now within the templates, we have the metrics preset and the thresholds on those metrics preset. When you add a SQL instance after the fact, so let's say I've added this Columbia server and I've applied this default template. If I want to know what I'm monitoring on that SQL instance, all I have to do is go to the server, right-click on it, and pick Configure Alerts. This brings up the dialog box that shows me all the metrics I'm monitoring. Anything with a checkbox is being monitored. Anything without a checkbox is being overlooked or we're missing. Again, the default templates set what we're going to monitor and set the threshold within these metrics. So the first thing you want to do is maybe go through the list of metrics and add and subtract the things that are important to you. The metrics are organized in different categories. So we have RDS, Amazon metrics, we have Azure metrics, we have metrics specifically around the health of availability groups and database metrics, metrics around operational issues like is CLR on or is CLR off, is OLE automation on or off. We have metrics around resource utilization of your SQL Server. So CPU, memory, disk, and stuff of that nature. And then underneath that, we have metrics for specific services. So are your SQL Server agent jobs running along? Are they failing? How's your replication doing? That kind of stuff. Underneath that, we also look at blocking, deadlocking, how many people are connected to your SQL instance. And the last area is virtualization. So the first thing you want to do, again, is to go through the list and remove things that aren't important to you. So let's imagine I don't necessarily care about CLR being monitored. Note that if I remove the checkbox and then hit apply, I'm no longer monitoring that on this Columbia server. One of the things I want to highlight is that when you do hit apply, Diagnostic Manager will ask, would you like to apply that change anywhere else? And if you hit yes, you have the option to have that change of turning on or turning off the metric you monitored, propagate it out to a bunch of different servers as needed, or you could make that change or turn on or turn off what you're monitoring based on group or tag. That's this area over here on the left. Or you can make that change and say, going forward, I want that change to be incorporated in whatever template I'm using. Now, the thing that's important to note is that templates are starting points. So if you make a change in a template over, and I'm going to cancel out of here, under the drop-down menu of the Tools menu and under Alert Configuration Templates, if you make a change to the default template, that's not going to necessarily make any changes on the SQL servers that are your target instances that you're monitoring. You have to make a change on a template and then apply it for that change to occur. So templates are starting points, or you use them to overwrite any customizations. A few other things I really want to highlight is if you're looking at the metrics that you want to monitor, just be aware that there are a lot of different features that are interesting to talk about. So first and foremost, again, you can turn on or off the metrics that you think are important, but then within the metrics you can make adjustments. So let's say I'm looking at memory consumption, OS memory usage. If I look at that metric, one of the things you'll see is that I'm hard-coded over here at 98% with a critical. Note that if I wanted to make an adjustment to a metric, I can always slide and move the indicators over to wherever I want, or I can actually type in the amount I'm looking for. So let's say I'm looking for critical to be at 98, but now I want to add a warning at 95. I can just type that in, and I've added that warning threshold as needed, or in this case. Another thing that's important to note when we talk about the metrics is that there are lots of advanced options. So let's imagine you're looking at monitoring, let's say a hard drive space. You can go to a hard drive and you can monitor it by overall percentage or amount in megabytes. So there's lots of different ways to monitor it. But let's say I've got a few different disks on my box, on my SQL instance, and one of them is 98% full, but that's expected. Just note that within the metrics within Diagnostic Manager, there's a lot of different options. So for example, what you can do is actually set a global threshold like I have here. And then you can also add specific metrics down to the individual drive. So let's say I have this Z drive and I want to have its warning condition be, or its critical condition be at 99%. I can add those specific metrics, and now I'm accounting for different scenarios that I want to make sure I'm not being notified of because they are within the parameters and within the bounds. Another thing I want to highlight is when you're looking at these metrics, one of the things you'll notice is some of the metrics seem to repeat themselves. So here's OS average disk queue length by count, and then there's the same metric underneath it, but it says underscore baseline. What I want to highlight here is these two metrics do monitor the same thing, but the top metric has a static value that's hard-coded. It doesn't change during the monitoring period. It doesn't change based on the day of the week or hour of the day. The metric underneath it, however, is a dynamic metric, and it will adjust. Its thresholds will adjust based on what's normal on your SQL instance. How we determine what's normal on your SQL instance is we use the baseline utility, which I'll show you in a second here. Prior to that, though, when you're looking at a metric, so again, I'm looking at OS average disk queue length by count, you can actually see a graphical representation of your baseline statistic for that metric on this server. And that gives you a way of adjusting the metrics based on how that server uses and consumes resources. Okay, so the baseline utility, it's turned on by default, nothing that you have to really do to get it turned on or configured, but I did want to highlight a few things to note. First and foremost, by default, we're running a dynamic baseline, a baseline calculated over the last 7 days. But if you'd like to put a custom baseline, a baseline for a static period of time, like a week out of a month or a day out of a week, you can certainly do it. By default, we monitor Monday through Friday, or we generate that baseline Monday through Friday, 7 day. I think it's 7 to 6 p.m. is the default setting. But the baseline utility will figure out how this server utilizes resources, and it will adjust accordingly, giving you, making your metrics adjust based on the hour of the day and day of the week. Now, just as a side note, you can specify different periods of time. So the default for the baseline utility is, again, Monday through Friday. I think it's 5 to 6, 6 p.m. But if you want to specify other periods of time, like let's say you have an ETL process that happens at night, or you have a backup window that happens at 2 o'clock in the morning till 4 in the morning, you can account for that by hitting the Manage Baseline button and putting in other periods of time. And this makes your dynamic metrics adjust based on what's normal for that period of time on that server. And all of that is so that you get away from false positives. One of the things you really want to do is make sure that the things that you're monitoring are critical to you and not just based off of the template. So the baselining allows us to figure out what's normal, and it lets us use dynamic metrics. Another thing to consider when we talk about the metrics is that you can make exceptions, and pretty much throughout this product, any metric that we're monitoring will have advanced options. So let's look at SQL Server job completion. Just note that with every metric you can hit advanced, and within advanced you can go through and depending on the metric include or exclude exceptions so that you're not getting false positives or getting email notifications about alerts that aren't alerts. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is if you're trying to adjust the metrics, the places that are most useful in my opinion are if you're trying to adjust a server's metrics specifically, I go to that server, And under the overview section, I go to active alerts. And this shows me the alerts that are currently occurring on this SQL instance. So let's imagine I can see that I've got blocking going on, and that's critical. But let's imagine for whatever reason, this blocking happens all the time in my environment, and for whatever reason I don't necessarily want to be notified about it. Just note that if I right click and hit configure alerts on that metric, and that's what I'm going to do, it will take me to the server in question, and it will highlight the metric that is causing that warning or critical condition. And from this scenario, if let's say I don't want to monitor blocking, or let's say I want to change the threshold, I can do that. I can remove the checkbox, and now I'm no longer monitoring it. Or I can come over here to the threshold and adjust the threshold to something that I feel is more appropriate. Now, this is just a hypothetical. I would suggest that it's probably best to monitor blocking, and probably at a lower level than 10 sessions in your environment. Another thing you'll notice is these ranks, the ranks that are available. The ranks are more informational than anything else. One thing to note is when you're configuring your email notifications or alerts, or how you react when a problem occurs, you can do that based on ranks. So ranks are a way of subdividing your alerts based on whatever group you would like to send them to. Again, you can add or subtract the metrics that are important to you. And then the last thing I want to highlight is that you just really want to go through and get rid of any exceptions or false positives. Another last piece of information is if you go to the alerts drop down, or the alerts view. So let's say I'm in the servers view and overview. If I go to alerts here, I can see all the different alerts I'm facing. And again, if I want to turn on or turn off different metrics, I can just right click on that alert and pick configure alerts, and it takes me to the server in question where I can make adjustments and changes. I hope this has been very helpful. I hope you have a great rest of the day.